Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Can you hear? Can you see me?
Yeah.
Seem to be having some problems here for some reason. I don't know why. Sankofa, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here. Peace to you, Brother Kevin, and peace to the rest of you brothers.
Okay, cool. That's what's up. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we're going to get ready to get started in a minute. Okay. Okay. See what we got here. Let me see. I'm hoping that this let me see here. Let me see. I'm hoping everything is being recorded. I can't tell. Let me check for a minute. Yes, it is.
Say it's being recorded on my screen.
Okay, that's good stuff. See, that's helpful. What's happening? All right, here we go. We're gonna get this on here. Okay, gentlemen. Want to thank you. What's up, Brother Mike? What's happening, man? Just want to thank everyone for coming on board for this gathering, final gathering on the series, getting the Dross off the goal, rediscovering who you really are. Common Humanity Mission Incorporated is a 501c3 MD Maryland nonprofit corporation that needs your support. Donate. Cash App, $CH Mission. Your donation is tax deductible. First Wednesday of the second, we talked about anxiety disorder and trauma stress related disorder. On the 9th, we talked about depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. Following Wednesday on the 16th, personality disorders, autism spectrum. Today, we want to talk about psychotic disorder. I want to say to brothers that this expression or dialogue, discussion and exchange, when it comes to getting the draws off the goal, there are some strong points that each and every one of you all made in a position that you all take. I want you all to also finally continue to support your case and the evidence that you have to back it up, and how it helped you as well as others. Better yet, how is it supporting you in your effort when it deals with overcoming disorders in one's life and even in your own life, the once again, the evidence, fruit, direct fruit of your labor and how you have assisted others. The DNA of Common Humanity Mission, based on social, cultural, science, comes to technology, agriculture, industry. I say that which we hold in common. We are promoters, cultivators, and communicators. We have the opportunity to express appreciation for this life in which we are living. What to expect? You will be inspired, you will be informed, you will be enlightened, you will be encouraged, and you will be empowered. As we go beyond race, class, gender, economics, politics, and education and religion. Common Humanity Mission, a light to the world. Our mission is to promote the value of self-worth. Our motto is to communicate with precision a clearer image to the world through 5 channels of communication. There will be understanding, tolerance, temperance/temperament, confidence, and respect. And communicating with precision a clearer image to the world, that be the reality in which we live in. With the understanding is to restore social credibility. And the tolerance of communicating with precision a clearer image to the world, second component of what I call the maturation process, is to readdress social diversity, moving from a persecuted minority to a privileged majority, diversifying, getting the draws off the goal when it comes to our feelings, emotions, thoughts, attitude, language/communication, action/activity. The third component of communicating with precision with precision a clearer image to the world is temperance/temperament. I believe I did say the one before that was tolerance. And that has to do with capacity training. When you have capacity training, you believe what you can do, that it could produce a particular result. Yet before anything manifests itself, it must first have order. The capacity to be able to abstain and show some discipline, and show some restraint, and strengthen one's resolve. Back to the third component of the maturation process, communicating with a clearer image to the world, with precision and clearance to the world's temperance/temperament. That's your attitude, which is designed to revive social coherency, to be more coherent. The fourth component of communicating with precision and clearer image to the world is confidence, that is designed to replenish the social continuity. And that social continuity is a kind of strange, because it may require you and I to empty out all and bring in something new. If you love something so much and it has been taken away from you, you value it, what will you do? Would it put you in a very chaotic mode? Would you become so erratic, irrational, undisciplined that you depend on it so much that you're unable to find your bearings? Final component of the maturation process of communicating with a clear image to the world for these 5 channels, which we hope do not block up, be a blockage in the channel. is respect, and that is designed to reclaim social solidarity as we see that was on the leg of the image of getting the draws off the gold. Our mandate is to cultivate the light of knowledge, or the potential of knowledge that is in us all. I have concluded that one's true potential purpose is to reach his full potential. That is to move from sympathy to empathy. If not, we become very apathetic. The 4-point platform, once again, we speak from academic freedom, intellectual independence / interdependence, financial stability, and spiritual understanding, the balance, material, physical, spiritual. There is a pivotal point that we must hold true to our true nature, and that is to be in harmony with ourselves, as Brother Paul would say, in harmony with the beat. We see the cat on the square. They will continue to be on the level one with another. There is the image of the light bulb of a little child. Said somewhere a little child would teach you. We are here to connect with great minds. Connecting with great minds, we will interact with those minds that starts off very small, may not know that they're great, but they start out small. But then as the mind becomes to evolve and the intellect starts to develop, they too know that their mind is great. They are destined for greatness. There was a story about the Williams sisters when her father was in the interview with another interviewer. He was questioning her confidence. He said, man, don't destroy her confidence. If she says she's going to be great, she's going to be great. Never destroy the confidence of a child. May we not continue to create an environment that destroys each other's confidence. And that is the continuity of our confidence in cooperating one with another. That was the interruption of us as a people. You see, the framework comes from our social health model. Social health model, the task, the effort, the time, energy, and the nature. We do not have time to waste, nor the energy. I realize that depression is associated when you lose your energy. So that's why we have to continue to replenish the energy. There are advantages and disadvantages. Perceived benefits, open-mindedness, closed-mindedness, narrow-mindedness. And we see the end results as the diagram or the graphic explains itself as the arrows are pointing in specific directions, coming from left to middle, which is the filtering process, and to the right, which is the end result. We hope that this session that we were shared one with another and with ourselves and with others. And we did get a comment from a brother who talked about the anxiety. And thank him for sharing his comment, that he said that it is real. He said that I'm just saying but the person takes drugs, but he don't depend on the drugs to help him through it. And he said that we need more discussions when it comes to disorders. So we want to say that possibly that which we measured, that we did meet a period. We hope that the need meeting period is the incentive. We hope that we all do our best. Something will give you the incentive or give people the incentive that they get the help that they need when it comes to any form of disorder. Then there's the issue resolving period, and we hope that there is an initiative that they will, or whoever will have the spark, the initiative, the motivation, the drive to get the help that they need. Then there's the problem solving spirit period. We hope that we help solve the problem when it comes to influence, environment, that challenge that many could be left to their own, vices. Larger society can get the best of them, even within their own homes. You never know what's going on. People's homes, we never know what's going on in really people mind. We know that behavior do not lie. So we must not be in denial of what's going on with ourselves when it comes to a disorder. The question, we answered some questions by way of virtue, value, view, vices, and virtue. And we hope that and we help people to find an indicator or the indications of the disorder, that we don't cross the line when it's like borderline when it comes to anxiety, post-traumatic stress, anything that is associated with a disorder, and they get the proper guidance that they need to help them along the way, just as well as it helps either you or I along the way. And maybe we all could help and have developed stronger problem-solving skills as we demonstrate maturity, responsibility, and wisdom. A pessimist sees difficulty in every difficulty, whereas an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. We want to, have the self-determination skills such as goal setting, decision making. That's why I say there's a dialogue, discussion, and exchange. The discussion is in the decision making, but the exchange must be mutual, so it helps in making the best decision making by way of dialogue, reasoning from the premise of conversation, and reasoning with progression. A variety of problem-solving processes, but each process consists of a set of identifying the problem, searching for possible solutions, most optimal one, and implementing a possible solution. We identify. See, one is questioning, then he raised his hand, he got the answer, hallelujah, or the car. Identify, select, evaluate, look for alternatives, set goals, explore, and then finally implement. Pay it forward, things to remember. Self-evaluating self is inspiring. As one says, an unexamined life is not a life worth living at all. Friends helping friends is informative. We want to inform another. We have a lot of information, but yet we need more transformation. Families housing families is enriching as well as enlightening. Organizations helping organizations is encouraging. Nations helping nations is empowering. Back to the social health model again. The task perceived susceptibility, resulting in restoring social credibility, because one's credibility needs to be restored with him or herself. The effort and the tolerance, the advantage and the disadvantages, people really speak from their own vantage point, but yet some can be clocked in a fixation. It's like someone could offer you a promise and unable to come through on the promise. That puts them at an advantage and it puts the others at a disadvantage, and what it creates fraudulent behavior, and it creates fatalism, fatalities of war due to fraud. We want to readdress social diversity when it comes to one's aspiration, because when inspiration comes down, one's aspiration goes up. The time is in the temperance, and it's right there in the middle. Health motivation, optimum health. Hopefully that we become practitioners of social maturity. And I overlook the perceived severity. Some things we may think are very severe and they're not as severe that we think that it is. Maybe it's the pus, getting the pus out from the bump. So we said resulting in revising social coherency, then the energy is in the confidence. Brother Paul would say self-assurance. Resulting in replenishing one's continuity, which comes from, associated with flows and blockages, limitations and accomplishments. Then we have the nature is in the respect. Surely we must respect each other, and open-mindedness about it. Some people will be closed-minded about some of the ideas or some of the comments, or maybe even closed-minded to their mental illness and maybe or disorder, I would say, and not in denial of it. One can become very narrow-minded, as well, and then there is perceived barriers that sometimes we put in front of us. When we're helping ourselves and we're helping others, we don't want to create barriers that prevent us and preventing others based upon what we think we know, that prevents them from getting the help that they need. And we want to reclaim social solidarity. Now, we want to look at this before we get going again. Cognitive factors, also called personal factors, knowledge, expectations. I realize that an unfulfilled expectation leads to frustration. What are the attitudes? What are the expectations that we have with who we are and what we know when it comes to ourselves and when it comes to a mental illness or a disorder? Because we realize, we see in the center that which determines human behavior. And there's behavior factors. What are the skills? As I stated earlier, the problem solving skills. I say diction skills, vocabulary skills, journaling skills, interpersonal skills, social skills. The skills of practice, what we put into practice. Self-efficacy, you know that you say that you have the capacity and the desire to produce a particular result. And how have you developed those skills? And are you able to put those skills into practice, as well as assisting others when it comes to disorder? Environmental factors, the social norms. We understand that society tends to want to zap you to a point where it's that it could channel and control your potential. So we don't want anything to zap us and control our potential. We want to control our potential when it comes to our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, our attitudes, language, communication, action, and activity. Access and community involvement. Community plays a major role when it comes to disorder. Family plays a role when it comes to disorder. Then we want to deal with the ability to change. You know, we have the ability to change, and no one won't change if he or she does not see an issue with his or her own action. Now, we'll go on now. Cognitive behavior therapy, addiction, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, low self-esteem, phobias, schizophrenic, suicide, ideation, and depression. I put up this model for a particular reason in regards to there are some things there that we may not know that we are displaying. When it comes to psychotherapy, we have narrative therapy. We have on this gathering, Marcus Sankofa Nix. He says he wants to change the narrative. This is a form of psychology that seeks to help patients identify their value. And sometimes people can use the Bible to help them to identify their values. They could use any religious text. They could use literature. Then we have the hypnotherapy. It could be Mike, you know, associated, could be a hypnosis, you know, which helps people to deal with hopelessness and hostility, as well as even immune systems as well. Then we have the gestalt. It could be Brother Paul, I don't know, but with emphasis, which emphasizes personal responsibility and focuses upon the individual's experience, you know, and his or her relationship with the world. And one of the things that's all about is to create a resolution of past conflict. May we reflect and meditate. And seeds of true hope, success, and love, it will all come back to you in abundance. This is the law of nature. getting the draws off the gold. Plant seeds of truth, hope, success, and love. It will come back to you in the abundance. This is the law. Welcome you all to this final session of getting the dross off the gold, rediscovering who you really are. Today's topic is psychotic disorder. Psychotic person is being out of touch with reality. We look at the word psych, like some people could, in the sound of it, could try to psych him or herself out. Chaotic or chaotic confusion. Being out of touch with reality. They have a severe malfunctioning disorder. They some could say that they are above the law. Some, in this culture, some will call it the affluent law, whereas that you have done something and you just don't, you're so out of touch with the world that you think that you can just get away with it. Some suffer from illusions of grandeur. Some have this sixth sense, some call it consciousness, this free spirit without structure. Knowledge is designed to give you structure. It must be brought back to this reality. And in the words of Kwame Ture, that the duty of the conscious is to make the unconscious aware of their unconscious behavior. So we must be made aware of our disorder behavior and come back and deal with this reality, this dis-ease of what is called a mental illness, because the word itself implies that if we don't deal with it tall, it will take its toll. It becomes taxing. And when something becomes taxing, we see it as a burden rather than a responsibility. Yes, as I stated earlier, I would like for, in this session here, that we talk about the psychotic disorder, that we, some feel very strong about certain positions, and then their approach when it comes to disorder or a mental illness. So that's why I try to put up that diagram of psychotherapy when it comes to narrative therapy, expressive therapy, group therapy, hypnotherapy, behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, gestalt therapy. And I perfectly left out psychoanalysis. Sometimes that really is offensive to people. But psychotherapy. So what's your take and your position when it comes to disorder or that which is psychotic or a psychotic person, and the position that you take and stand in your approach what are the fruits or the results of the desired outcome that you have produced, and how have it helped you, and the evidence of how it has helped others. The floor is open.
Could you state that question again, Brother Kevin? The last piece I heard you said
How has it helped you, and how the desired outcome, if I may say that, how has it, what are the results of it, of your effort how has it helped others?
When you say how has it, what are you speaking to?
I'm talking about when it comes to dealing with disorders and helping people to overcome their disorder.
Man, I'll just go ahead and say, as far as it pertains to what is being labeled a psychotic disorder, it's a difficult endeavor for many times to sometimes share with somebody that they aren't seeing what they believe they're seeing, or moreover, or more so, hearing what they believe they're hearing, or if we talk about being more delusional, that the way that you see the world is pretty out of touch with what is in reality going on. Now, I think as I reflect back on some of the topics previous to this particular set of what we call disorders, that this one right here is probably one of the more touchy ones, because it kind of depends on one's cultural beliefs, norms, religious beliefs, spiritual systems. You have to take a lot of things into account, because what is seemingly out of order for some is in total order for others. What is seemingly psychotic for some is not psychotic for others. Especially when we talk about our community, you know, we have to be real careful on diagnosing people as being psychotic as we once were being labeled psychotic, because it's nothing for a African American or a black person to come into a counseling room and say, I saw my grandmother last night, but she's dead. She's been dead 20 years. There's nothing for an African American or even others to say I had visions. This is very common. Now, I have seen where it became too far to the right, where it has become too much for a person to deal with. Now, I was reading a little something a little earlier, and it said anything can be in a normal range, quote unquote. Now, we know normal is subjective. It's, you know, and I think that sometimes we stray away from what is normal, especially us in the black community, because we say, how can somebody else identify what is normal for us? But I say, well, let us identify what is appropriate or normal for us. Now, I think it's a litmus test. When we can't get along with other people, when we can't socialize with other people, when we can't maintain relationships. Because really, all disorders manifest in their relationships. And if we really look at what we call the African American community, we struggle majorly in our relationships. One example, we tend to believe that people are psychotic because of some of their beliefs. Now, if you believe anything long enough and strong enough, you'll see anything or hear anything. Those who are in certain religious faiths will point the finger at each other and call each other crazy because they believe what they believe. One example would be the Nation of Islam when they talk about the mothership. To some Christians, that's ridiculous. But to the Nation of Islam, a Holy Ghost is ridiculous. To some, when they say I talk to Ola Damari, or I bow down to Abatala, or what have you, it's seemingly crazy to those who are not a part of that culture, tradition, or what have you. But there's those who are even outside of those traditions, or if they are in those traditions, that those people who believe, though, you know, in these different deities, entities, and different I guess things that other people don't believe in, also believe that people in their own traditions may go a little too far, which is a heavy debate in the spiritual world, because some would suggest that what we call schizophrenia is more of a spiritual, a person is very spiritual. So it becomes a very interesting topic when we speak to this thing from a spiritual standpoint.
Yes, sir. Any next? It's open for you all. One wants to touch this topic. See?
I said it's an interesting topic. It's a very difficult topic, you know, because nobody wants to be called crazy.
Well, I'll say this. This subject is very, as Brother Dennis is saying, it's a very heretofore topic, and what we are dealing with is an extreme dynamic going on within someone. I relate to the psychotic behavior from two positions. One, in one who has strong personality. Two, one who has high energy vibration. And so in numerology, the 11 and 22 are people who appear to more so struggle with and are challenged by psychotic disorder.
So I fit that.
Say that again?
I guess I fit that one.
Because of the level of the energy that's channeled in the spirit realm to high vibration frequency. And so over the years, what I have done is I've looked at the energy in people's name as incidences have arisen in the community or nationally or headlines. I would always look at the name of the person who was being challenged. When people have how do you say, a very dominant personality, and they have, a lot of time it's from a business perspective, excuse me, people who are just, they've created this energy of kind of like, if we use Donald Trump as an example of that type of behavior, that type of drive. And so bordering on sanity and insanity, just like the saying, it's a thin line between love and hate. There's a thin line between sane and insane when one has the ability to create her or his own circumstances. So for me, what I would call a mental disorder many years ago is when I would see someone who did not want to fit in society or play by the society rules and begin to create their own in their own world, in their own sphere. And what they would do is communicate internally with themselves, which to me would create a certain interaction with spirit. And so one of the things we hear constantly with psychotic breaks and psychotic behavior is, I was talking to God, my dog talked to me, and all the things we hear connected to someone having some inner communication with some other source or force. And that appears to be the spirit world that some have a understanding of, some don't believe in, some see it in a different perspective. And so I think that, we take the diagnosis of basically Western civilization and how they have laid out the diagnosis and give us the definition or the information and how the research that they've done, which they've done a great job at recording and researching things. And then we have, many parts of the world who have done similar things from history. But it's really interesting, as Brother Dennis said, because there's so many different modalities that may express it in a different way.
Anyone else? Next.
Peace. I was trying to sit back and really process and break down the what you put forth and really chew on it. There are a lot of things to consider and a lot of things to take into account, as it's already been said. The word psychotic is not necessarily a term that I use much, nor have I, through my experience of working with students, being an educator in the community, ranging from different places, regions, and backgrounds, have not diagnosed anyone, nor have I had the experiences of necessarily somebody saying, they've seen a deceased person or any of those other examples that was mentioned. But I can speak to circumstances where there is this notion of taking on some kind of identity in a sense of perhaps due to an inadequacy that you have or that you feel you feel as though you have to then now take on some other identity. I remember when I was young, I played sports, I played basketball, and there were so many young men like myself who wanted to be this celebrity or be this athlete or be this person. And that's what they were trying to identify. That's what they saw themselves as. I think, now, some might want to identify with a whole nother race or ethnicity. Some might find themselves even wanting to be mythological figures that we might have read about and studied about. So one of the things that I notice is that even there's a range of different experiences that people experience, that they go through, different backgrounds, different upbringings. But I do notice in relationships, especially as it's been said, that there are a lot of times maybe some common themes or some consistent threads. So for lack of trust, or feeling that many are out to get you more than what is really the case, or this hypervigilance, or as Resma Menakem speaks about, trauma ghosting, where you are continuously anticipating this perceived threat, this perceived danger. Now, some may say, I'm not that diagnosed person or I'm not going to accept that label. However, these may be some of the consistent qualities and traits that might be consistently exuded. And so I think a large part of that is because of the narrative or the stories that has been adopted, that has been taken on. And these narratives are so powerful. We're married to these narratives. The brother the other evening who was on had asked a question and had labeled himself depressed. He labeled himself that. And so the things that we consider ourselves to be, it's very powerful. And so I think that it's not difficult to find how that can really rupture and create friction in relationships. Feeling as though somebody's intentionally trying to do harm to you, feeling as though that you've been alienated, feeling as though you're inadequate. And so these things can bring you out of touch with reality. Maybe not to the extent of bringing about a diagnosis, but these things can definitely create harm. These things can definitely create issues. And so these distortions, these cognitive distortions, a lot of times individuals or people may go so long, it becomes second nature. It becomes habitual. It becomes the norm. It becomes their way of existing. It's how they show up in their reality. And so so once again, I think that in relationships, a lot of times you can see a lot of different things. And there's a lot of different things to take into account. And when a group of people, especially historically, has been told so many negative things, when the stories and when the things that have been mentioned associated with identity and ethnicity and all of those things, a lot of times have been from a deficit perspective, it's understandable why there are times when individuals or groups of people may want to identify as something else, or when they might want to gain some sense of power or some sense of empowerment, to be built up and to be lifted up by taking on another identity. And so it's a very delicate topic. But I've definitely been able to have some experience, especially with young people who may not have got the diagnosis, or may have been told they're psychotic, but they may exude certain elements or certain qualities that would definitely, indeed, I would say, put them out of touch with reality on various levels.
Brother Mike. Brother Mike. You're still on mute, brother.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was saying, I'm listening to the conversation, and I think what everybody's saying is very valuable. And when we take these considerations and put them all together, then we start to get a better look at the picture. And what I was going to say is, 45 years ago, I had to go through this situation with my brother. And so I had to go visit the psychiatrist with him. had to talk to him about the family, the environment, what he was going through, or what I attempted to feel that he was going through, because that was his reality at his time. And that's how he interpreted everything that had come to in his life. So when you look at, like Paul was saying, when you look at the numerology of a person, my brother was born on the 11th and his destiny number is a 22. So I know my brother, there's a great teacher inside of him. And that lessons that he was teaching us in this whole psychotic behavior and not wanting to live, from being rejected as a family, as being not fit in, as being very smart. At the same token, he was, I felt he was missing the love. And to make the bottom line is now he's happily married. He has somebody in his corner. And I can see day by day personal growth. And I remember back to when we were in our 20s. But this whole thing of psychotic behavior, that becomes a person's reality. And the pain that we feel in life and not knowing things, because I feel blessed with the teachers I've had and the fact that I did astrology for over 40 years. So I got to see the behavior patterns of people and understand the behavior patterns. And the more that you can take into consideration about a person, the more that you can take into consideration their environment and the levels of stressors that they have to deal with on a daily basis. And those stressors, nobody can determine the stressor for anyone else. Because what I may feel as being stressful, you may take it as a walk in the park. So we never know how people are going to react to different situations. But the first thing I would say is always honor a person's reality. And one of the thoughts that I was having this week is that how many times do we allow our prejudices to miss the genius within ourselves and to miss the geniuses within other people? And when people are going through a psychotic episode, to me, it's important to understand their situation in that moment and to understand that that is their reality.
Uh-huh.
And when we understand that it's their reality and try to walk in their shoes, don't sit back and judge them from your position, from your education, from your life. Look at their environment and what they're going through in that moment and try to create an understanding and a respect for that, and then use the tools, because we all have incredible toolboxes on this call. And so when we start to use the tools that we have, we can work to help build and take people out of this level of stress. So again, it's to me, it's an understanding, it's a consideration, it's a respect, it's a tolerance, and it's working to help make someone whole. And what each one of us, if we talk, we'd all have our own definition of what is wholeness and what makes a person whole. So there's no one cookie cutter size that's going to fit somebody. But if we all learn to give people love and bring them into light, bring them into that light of themselves, then we are using our power for the highest good. Because this to me, this is the way, going through this 45 years ago, I know it was very instrumental in bringing my brother out of this. And, I know that I spent time with the psychologist explaining my interpretation of what was going on in the family. And there was a lot of pain, a lot of misunderstanding, and there was also a lot of love. And that brought us through this whole thing with greater understanding and greater respect for each other.
Yeah.
Well, brother Michael, I'll say this. I think a lot of what you just mentioned, um, it resonates with me, and I definitely see merit in what you say. I will say, from my experience, that which you just spoke of does not always. The outcomes don't always come so smooth as you just eloquently articulated, my brother. And what I mean by that is, I know you mentioned, honoring a person's reality. We never know what people are going through, and that's absolutely the case. A lot of times we don't know. But one of the things that or some of the things that I've encountered from my own experiences that life has taught me is that you could be giving some sharing some wisdom, or you may be coming from a place of trying to impart some advice, but that person may interpret it as being judgmental, or the person may take it as may be very defensive, and may have their guard up. So I think that sometimes there's a thin line between, judgment, or a person feeling judged, versus, it not being a judgment or a slight on their character, but it is just, perhaps it could be a tidbit of encouragement or something like that. So I think that sometimes where the friction can happen is in the approach. There's been situations where I might have said something, in the most mildest, tenderest way that I could say it, and I'm in different types of relationships. I'm married. I have all types of family, different things. Now I could say something that, very tender, very mild. But that doesn't mean the person is not gonna respond in a certain way, like they ready to go back and forth for a few minutes. So
Exactly.
I just wanted to just say that what you said, I totally get the basis of what you're saying, but I think yet again, and to tie it to the previous thing that Brother Kevin put forth, because sometimes we lack the trust, because sometimes we feel as though we have to be hyper vigilant, or because sometimes, we feel like we have to put on different badges of armor and perhaps be something that we're not, instead of humbling ourselves at times. I think there's moments when that process there could be difficulty. And just because there's difficulty or friction doesn't have to mean it's a bad thing. But I think that, with my experience in relationships, it doesn't necessarily always pan out to go that smooth as it would seem. So
I'm not saying that it was a smooth sailing, but what I'm saying is consistently through that. And thank God I had studied astrology, because right away, when we talk about a psychotic break, I know we're talking about the planet Neptune, and we're talking about 12th house affairs. And so when you look and understand that situation from that way, you can start to use the cosmos and the heavens and different things to resolve it. So I agree with what you said. You have to walk and put on your delicate gloves, because anything you say, anything you could do, could be done with the best loving and highest intentions, and could be interpreted just the opposite. But this was a long process, and in going through the process, in the summation, it may sound easy, but there were a lot of pain. There was a lot of tearful nights.
Mm.
There were a lot of because I always looked up to my older brother. So to see my older brother in that type of state just hurt my heart. I mean, I can't tell you how much it hurt my heart. And this is going back 40, 45 years ago, and I still remember it. So it wasn't all smooth. You know, it's nervousness going in to talk to the psychiatrist, everything. When you put yourself in front and you become naked to them, naked to your way of life, naked to your understanding, then it just opens your mind up to a whole nother realm and a whole nother realm of possibilities. And when you can emphasize and feel the other's pain and keep your own sense of dignity, that's when you start to make, anyway, for me, that was a great step in helping me to make progress on this path.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think both the brothers talked to some key points as far as empathizing, and also, as Brother Sankofa saying, is not easy, right? But I think when we talk about psychotic disorders, we must keep in mind that there's various diagnoses, quote unquote, that fall under these disorders. I'll just mention some here because, as Brother Sankofa said, and I'm going to further emphasize exactly. I mean, I'm going to build on it, and that is when we look at those diagnoses or disorders that fall under that spectrum of schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders, we have to realize that some will never, for the most part, be able to tap back into, if you call this reality or not. Some struggle on a daily basis. Some actually take medication. Some don't take medication. In fact, there's some who was against medication who say then they start taking medication and say they're blessed for taking medication. Because I know that's not a popular topic in our community, but there's many, including some of my colleagues and their family members, who actually I've done a what is it called, Brother Sankofa, did you take part in the study I did? I think you did. It was a group. What is it called?
I took part in what you did. That was like a one-time
Yeah, it was I forgot. I can't even think of the term. I'm sleepy, y'all. So apologize.
Is that what you?
Not a support group. It's called it's like a brainstorming group. It's kind of like you build off of it, but nonetheless, we can talk about schizotypal personality disorder, delusional disorder, brief psychotic disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, schizotypal, all, just various disorders, even all the way up to catatonia, where lots of people actually get stuck in certain positions and things of that nature. So when we talk about these, we also, I think, I know I hear, the numerology aspect of it, but I want to say that for many, those numbers don't have those numbers, and they still get these disorders manifest. Not that the brother said anything different. I just want to be clear that these disorders manifest, and it doesn't have to have anything. You don't have to fall on 11 or 22. In fact, there's research to support that, some biological basis or organic basis, which would say that is also, would lend to say that, well, it's organic or it's genetic, or people share, even if it's not genetic, but people who tend to fall under, who share genetics tend to I'm sorry, I'm very tired. So tend to actually get this disorder. If someone's father had schizophrenia, it's highly likely that his son or his a greater chance for these things to happen, or your grandfather or your mother. And I think that has to do with this whole idea that we talk about, as the brothers spoke about earlier, when they spoke about this whole nature versus nurture piece. I mean, they spoke about more of a nurturing piece, meaning the environment, and how environmental stresses can bring these things about. There's also research to suppose that, as I think Brother Paul alluded to, that if I don't want to really, if this reality is not the reality that I want to check, and I'll create this reality of my own. Some would say maybe that is the body doing a or the brain or the spirit or what have you, doing something of a protective measure. Some would argue against it, some will argue for it, but nonetheless, I just want to say that there's various forms of psychotic disorders, and I'll read something briefly. I just want to read this because I often see it in some of our teachers, some of our greatest conspiracy theorists, some of the communities that we, some of the teachers that I've seen in the community, where they actually implode because of their fears, to a great degree irrational. So I'm just going to give you an example. The person on the right, meaning that the person who's far off to the far right end of the spectrum of dealing with a psychotic disorder, the person to the right has a different and more serious problem. She is being flooded by the dream world and is no longer in touch with reality. She has lost the filter that most of us possess that allows us to know the difference between what is real and what is fantasy. She is full of delusions, and she has become convinced that aliens invaded our planet and are taking over her neighborhood. Now, I want to slow down. Again, if a person believes these things, as Brother Michael said, give them respect in their reality. Respect them for where they are, for their reality, for their experience, for their existence. It's not for us to go ahead and beat up on them, because that's not going to help anybody. She is full of delusions, and she has become convinced that aliens invaded our planet and are taking over her neighborhood. She has visual hallucinations. She seeing images of these aliens attacking. She further believes they have been monitoring her phone and spying on her actions. She hears voices incessantly. The voices give her instructions as if they direct her thoughts and actions. They are sometimes dark and critical and occasionally tell her to give up. It is absolutely terrifying to develop psychotic symptoms of this intensity. It is arguably the worst of the psychiatric diagnosis. She is in urgent need of hospitalization. They say here antipsychotic medications and acute stabilization. So there's plenty of people who've done some great things who actually operate at that end. I can't remember the brother's name. I mean, who was the movie A Beautiful Mind was created after. My mind is a little tired right now. Somebody help me. He created Game Theory. Have y'all seen the movie Beautiful Mind?
Yeah, I saw that. Wasn't that with Russell Brand?
I don't know the actor, but I'm talking about the real person who life it was created after, though.
Yeah, I don't recall his name.
Nonetheless, he created game theory. So there's people, who really can tap into some things on that in that reality. However, I also want to talk about this part that Brother Kevin spoke about earlier, when we have delusions of grandeur, which can become very oppressive. So at that point, that's where I think I separate between empathizing, and I still empathize, and not taking action, but taking action, because there are people who believe a lot of things, and we have a lot of people that are very vulnerable and will follow these individuals who often create cult followings. And hence you hear stories of how great they are and how they're the best, and high levels of narcissism, and how you start to see years later they've raped children, they've taken men's wives, and they moved out on to land where they kind of separated from the United States or what have you. I'm not saying that people can't go and do their thing, but do it without hurting people. But there's a lot of people, I won't mention the names, but I know personally, and even some who died recently in what we call some of our African-centered circles, who are very paranoid, what you call more of a paranoid on a schizophrenic spectrum, that believe a lot of things that aren't true, and they teach people who aren't necessarily schizophrenic to believe these delusions. So hence they become deluded, and then they come to me with all types of anxieties and things of how that they're taking children and they're taking their guts out of them and making stuff for rich white people. So, and now they said they have children, and the children are now might be victims of this type of thing. Now the world has a lot of stuff that's not healthy, but that's not the entirety of the world. But when you get stuck in that thought, in that mind frame, a person will live with serious fear, panic attacks, anxieties, all types of things. Pardon me for my choppiness, I'm a little tired.
Brother Paul, like
think-
you want to say something?
I think I think what's interesting about this subject is because there are people who are operating in different dimensions, different levels of vibration, spirit, I think the norm is for people to identify with flesh and blood. And because we're all in these bodies, then it seems to be more normal when we're operating. What I would share is that over my journey being I have met so many unique people that society would label mental disorder, a mental defect, crazy. And I was able to look into the spirit of these people and see a journey that was going on internally. Now, what I would suggest is when people have a gift of spirituality, meaning their gift is spirit, that if they are not given a foundation, if they are not interacting with maybe someone who has a maturity, someone who has their best interests, that I would say many of them would end up, being labeled crazy. Because I would say I have at least interacted with 8 people, I would say, to this point in my life, who would definitely have been labeled with some type of mental disorder. And see, for me, mental mind disorder, a sick mind, to me, it's like that's just not limited to the people who have these stronger personalities or high vibrations. So some people can cover their mental disorders very well and operate in society what one may perceive normal for pretty much all their life and be kind of out of order, mentally out of order. And so that's why this subject is very interesting, because what we have a tendency to be able to identify with is the stronger personalities. And like a lot of the interactions that I've had with people who were challenged with mental balance, had not only strong personalities, but they were very intelligent. Even they may not have much education, but you could see the intelligent level in them. Their mind was going, it was constantly going. And so what I would do is draw inferences from all the experiences and begin to put together a picture using spiritual law to understand what was the dynamics. For example, in this journey, I would meet people in my very young age that they were just fixated on something. Like one brother I met was fixated on language. Man, it's in the language. It's in the language. And I mean, every time I saw him, he was a professor or he was connected to a professor at Howard. And every time I interacted with him, he basically said the same thing. You could see he was fixated. And he appeared to be imbalanced, but the message was so passionate in him, it enlightened me to study language. I met another guy who was like that, talking about the ocean. He was very interested. Didn't get to interact with him long over periods because he eventually disappeared, but that's what he was. It's all about the ocean and water. And it was like he was so in tune to what was going on in the water. And the things he said to me was way kind of on a whole nother plane. And I was just like listening and going, wow, this is very interesting. But what I was able to do is to go into the mind, to the spirit of this person's universe, this person's world, and begin to identify the journey they were on mentally and trying to help understand how they got there and what they had discovered, because that's what was fascinating for me. I met one young lady where a guy called me and said, I have somebody I wanted you to talk to, and she was downtown DC. So I never physically met her, but I spent about 4 hours on the phone with her. And she could see things that nobody else could see. And so as she began to talk about the things she was experiencing, and I would say to her, there's nothing wrong with you. You just have a spiritual gift. So the things that you're able to see and understand on a spiritual level, don't share them with people. It's because that is yours. It's for you. It's not for you to share it with other people. If I started telling people the things I've experienced, most people in a carnal mind would say, this fool lost his mind. He's mentally ill. Lock him up. So, I mean, so it's like, I think so much of it is the balance of understanding the spirit and then the physical world, because to me, all of these mental disorders has to do with the carnal mind and then understanding the spiritual relationship with it. And so when you are not interacting with a knowledge of self, then it can be easily where you're operating in the physical world and the spiritual things you're trying to grasp or connect with or share with others, and people are just not experiencing those things or haven't experienced those things.
Brother Paul, I have a question. So from what you're suggesting is a disorder, or you saying that people have these disorders, they might not have a strong personality or energy. What would you define, or how would you identify a disorder?
I would say a mental disorder is one who is not acknowledging the spirit realm of self over a period of time where they're trying to fit their perception of themselves and reality in a physical reality. I think that's what creates the starting point. Now, of course, there are many dynamics that grow beyond that, but to me, from observation, it's like when we are trying to understand this life, this physicality, without understanding the governing sources of it, it creates a lot of challenges mentally. And so if you're operating at a high vibration and moving very quickly, your mind has already intelligently circled a lot of information, but it's what we come up mathematically with in our conclusion. So once you have said, like, for example, I think a part of the whole developmental process of what we're talking about has to do with deceptive intelligence. So when deceptive intelligence, which means that I meet a lot of intelligent people, and they're so intelligent that they know everything, but they're not conscious of things that they need to understand. So they've convinced themselves of all kinds of stuff that's not grounded in anything. It's a philosophy that they're living in. So to me, that becomes very dangerous.
So does it bring some disorder to their life?
Or it brings a mental imbalance.
So
yeah, it starts there.
Are they struggling with it or no?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So almost every person I see, like one is my younger sister. She's highly intelligent. She knows everything. So she'll say, I'm going to lose my mind. And I'm saying, well, Mia, the reason why you're going to lose your mind is because you're creating it. It's like, but you stop doing anything. In other words, she's forcing herself to do something that is not within her capability. And then she's saying, well, if I'm not able to do it, then I'm just going to, and she's just talking it, probably trying to be facetious in a sense. But because she has this strong will of determination, so she says to me at one point, she said, I'm kind of sad I want to say this, but I'm going to say this to you. I always get what I want. And I said, Mia, nobody gets everything they want. Okay. And I said, the universe has a way of sending you life lessons when you think on that level to help you. So if you try to ignore that life lesson and force it, you're playing a very dangerous game with your own mental state.
Well, that person might not be considered psychotic, but she might be considered in that moment delusional.
Right. Exactly. We'll start somewhere. This is exactly the point.
So yeah.
I mean, my question is, because I know there's some terms that have been mentioned, and what maybe some of the qualities or characteristics are, the behaviors that might be associated with it. But my question is, and I would say I would first ask you, Minister Sar, like, what, I can imagine it's not a one size fit all kind of thing, but what are some of the things that would, I guess, deem a person to be diagnosed with a psychotic disorder? And I know you mentioned some examples, you gave us some examples, but my question is, what are the things that would make a person diagnosable?
What would make a person diagnosable? I mean, it's so many disorders in that spectrum. Now, I agree with let me just say this. I agree with what Paul is saying about Brother Paul is saying about people being deluded. But one thing and I'm coming back, Brother Sankofa, and one thing that I tend to find in that African, Black, whatever, people of humans, whatever we call our community, I find that we pick up the more severe forms of mental illness, and then we kind of more focus in on those who are a little delusional, which does cause a lot of problems because a lot of us are deluded and causes problems in our lives, as Brother Paul was saying. But but I think that on both ends of the spectrum, those who are so carnal, quote unquote, biological, physical, which I still argue is a reality, and those who are so spiritual, which I still argue is a reality. I just definitely believe that both of them are everything is everything, all is one, and all is real, So, what would give what would count as a diagnosis? So let's do this. Let's go here. I think I read something a little earlier here. Oh, I got it. All right, so let's look at delusional disorder. Enduring delusions that may be accompanied by non-prominent hallucinations pertinent to the nature of the delusion itself. Functioning is not significantly affected apart from behaviors specifically related to delusions. Behavior generally does not appear to be odd or peculiar. Types of delusions may be erotomania, grandiose, persecutory, jealous, somatic, mixed, unspecified. Let me go to schizophrenia. This is one most people are familiar with. At least two of the following symptoms are manifested for a period lasting at least 6 months. Hallucinations, delusions, disorganized, incoherent speech, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior, negative symptoms such as reduced emotional expressiveness or avolition. Conditions has had a significant impact on the ability to function in areas such as occupation, academia, interpersonal, or self-care. So I think that's a real, that's kind of like what some of the symptoms are to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Catatonia, let's just give you an idea. I talked about it a little earlier. Indicated by the presence of three or more of the following: stupor, waxy flexibility, mutism, negativism, posturing, mannerism, stereotyping, agitation, grimacing. I can't even say that word. Echolalia, and I would have to look that word up. But nonetheless, catatonia, a lot of people get stuck. They get stuck in positions. There's a lot of things that it's a very broad spectrum. Schizoaffective disorder, just to give you another one. An illness characterized by a continuous period of wherein the major symptoms of schizophrenia are present and the majority of the duration of the condition, major mood, depressive or manic episodes are present. Substance, okay. So, and another thing is, I forgot it, y'all. I'm tired. Excuse me. I didn't have my V8 today. Hey, I didn't have but nonetheless, it's real. And let me just say this: it's real, and it affects our lives. And when things start affecting people's interpersonal relationships, people are suffering. Even those who identify as spiritual, they suffer. And now my understanding of spirituality is, if you really tapped in, this worldly experience would not be such a struggle. Because
yes, if you're tapped in, that's the key.
Yeah, if you're tapped in. But those people who call people schizophrenic as extra spiritual beings, lots of times they are struggling in this reality.
But what they're struggling with is their attachment to material.
I don't
That's
know.
what the struggle is.
I don't know if I agree with that, Paul.
Get
I
deep
mean,
into
but
that psyche.
I think I agree with it. You know what? Let me say this. I think I agree with what you're saying.
Mhm.
But I think you say it in such a way that's kind of, it's not the normal, typical way that people
That's
understand
true.
the material.
That's true. That's true. That's
So,
on point, brother.
because to you, thoughts and things are going to be material. And you know, so I can't understand that. But when you say it in such a way, I think people, I think, aren't necessarily always as heavy and philosophical and deep and spiritual, you know, have that language, what makes it difficult for them to grasp. But I agree with it in the way you define it. But most of us think of material as something like this.
Yes.
But
Or
that,
we think,
Mhm.
you know, material as so, and not just, and that not, we don't think that thoughts and the mind can also be material. So,
Mhm.
you know, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, the mind, see, again, what we're dealing with is spirit, and that's what we're not taught. Nobody's teaching spiritual law, spirituality. It's taboo. And so it's almost like it's foreign. So the challenge with so many of us, human beings on planet Earth, United States, citizens. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. People here in the United States, African Americans in our community, the biggest challenge is that because there's no real foundation for spirituality, we lump religion and spirituality in a common set. And it's so different. It's so different. Religion has to do with your way of life and how you live your life following according to a practice. Spirituality is in your DNA. It's in your heat. It is in your molecules of your brain.
What do you
It
mean
is
by that?
in your heartbeat. So spirituality is energy. It's the source. And so it's in everything. So it cannot be
So it's always
separated. And
Okay.
that's why, for me, it's really important to understand that.
Okay.
all right, let me share something. There's something that says that the first spirit is from the earth. Before I go on, I want to say this, that the natural urge is in the intellect to see and understand. That's cognition. So what is the basis of the foundation of our coming into being? Earth, material matter. We come to understand earth. There is no life without a material basis. You may think you do not have a material basis. But if you ever wake up from your senses, something is going to tell you, get down from here. Everything this earth has a material basis. And I think this too. I think that there is too much victim due to bad influences. Morals can be false. Morals can be lies. They can be corrupt. Morals are right and wrong. Morals are filthy. They're clean. Moral does not make a thing right. Morale is only a word that brings into mind right and wrong. The more morality, the more morally truthful our vision becomes, the more secure life becomes from us. Because vision stems from the source of one's thinking. So when we look at, for me, when I look at disorder or mental disorder, we're gonna all try to bring this to a close, that I look at it in a sense of knowing that certain things and certain encounters and certain experiences, it takes a toll on us. The body in which we become older, it takes a toll. And when something takes a toll, you will have to pay if you're unable to deal with it. So if there is a mental disorder, there seems to be the word dis itself, there seems to be a disrespect when it comes to living in harmony with self. And when one is unable to live in harmony with himself in this material world, once again, it starts to take its toll. You become out of order rather than being in order. So once again, we go back to the balance that is needed in order to try to maintain a sense of functionality, if I may use that word, a sense of sanity. Brother Mike talked about being there for his brother, helping him to go through what he was going through. Because one thing I realized what Dr. Sismo says about culture, you have to take a very serious look at culture when it becomes destructive. Culture is dynamic, it always changes. Something must compensate or make up from the void that is empty, that is not there, or that which is not being filled. So it could be a natural thing if there is something that is not filled, that he or she will go and don't want to deal with this reality. That they maybe will smoke a joint or drink something just to take the edge off. One thing I realized about knowledge, you got the word edge on it. You know, but it is designed to give us structure. That seems to be something that many are running away from. Structure, how we structure our feelings, how we structure our emotions, how we structure our thoughts, how we structure our attitude, how we structure the language and the manner and way in which we communicate, and how we structure our actions and our activity and our interactions one with another. We must have structure. I understand that what we call Western medicine or Western science and how they study and come up with things, it is a reflection of them. And if it benefits them, so be it. But yet it could also benefit us if we study it. So it's no good to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We must take from that which we serve that could benefit us. And if it benefits us and it creates a balance in our lives, and I always say that in that balance, you have understanding. And when you have understanding, you have clarity. So where there is spirit, there is energy. And when you have energy, the energy must be synergized. And when that energy is synergized, you know, there is a sense of grounding. There is a sense of humbleness. There is a sense of centeringness. And when one is centered, it means that that state of development, one becomes conscious of his or her state of development and become aware of his or her full potential, and he or she taps into that resiliency. And once he taps into that resiliency, that becomes his or her authority, which means he or she takes control over his feelings, over his emotions, over his attitude, over his language. I'm still talking about getting the dross off the goal, because Mike gave a clear illustration again that he helped his brother to take control over those thoughts, those feelings, those emotions. Huh? Brother Dennis Assar Winkler is talking this the same thing. We must take control over it and fact about it and being able to deal with this reality. Paul, you're saying something similar. We need to take control. We can be too spiritual. If we deal with something that is too much to the left and realize we got to come back to the centering. We could be too to the right. We got to come back to the centering. Sankofa, I want to be clear about that, because he had an experience with a young person who took his or her life. This mental health issue, it is very serious. So we cannot play games when we start having these discussions. That's why I said we want to get the draws off from the goal, but we are golden. And I'm talking about our feelings, the impurities, our feelings, our emotions, our attitude, our thoughts, our attitude, our language, our communication, and our action. We're going to bring down some closing remarks as we bring this thing to a conclusion, which is, I always say, which it isn't a conclusion.
Let me start by concluding with this. What is the law on unattended consequences? Unattended consequences are often the result of situations that are set in motion by an unqualified awareness. Unattended consequences are often the result of situations that are set in motion by an unqualified awareness. What's so important for us to understand is universal laws can always be demonstrated. So even though it's an unseen law, it manifests in some form of physical manifestation. So when it's interacting with physicality. So unattended consequences are often the result of situations that are set in motion by an unqualified awareness, unconscious choices, and having yet to acknowledge and access the awareness of spiritual laws. And what I'm suggesting there, this is always the foundation for mental imbalance.
Next, I want to share closing remarks.
I would say that, with this session number 4 being a quarter of the other 3, and many things that have been discussed have really been interconnected and harmoniously tied to one another with each week's topic and theme. I'll just say that these disorders that we speak about, they run very deep. And this conversation that we had even this evening was a very complicated, multifaceted, complex conversation, because there's so many different factors and nuance and different things to take into consideration. And especially what leads up to these disorders even developing and what the process is like. But one thing that I would say is a lot of times when reality is avoided, the more problems occur as to whenever things can be confronted, which can require courage, which requires being brave, even perhaps can cause some dissonance and some other discomforts. But there's a lot of growth on different levels that could come from that. I know, brother Kevin, you and I have spoke about memory, and I can say in my personal experience, even though, as I said earlier, I haven't dealt with individuals who have had these extreme cases that have been mentioned before about aliens and family members and stuff like that. I found success in being able to get through by sharing that you've been through some stuff before. And when you went through some things before, you pulled through. And so don't get that, don't forget how in the not too distant past you've been able to pull through. And so that memory piece, I think, is definitely important, whether it's individual or collective. But I appreciate the discussions and the dialogue. And I'm humbled and honored to have been able to be a part of our illustrious panel as a part of our 4-part gathering. So thank you.
Brother Mike.
Yes, what I'd like to say is, number one, I always enjoy when we come together and meet, because it always expands my consciousness, listening to the different points of view, different ideas. So I thank everyone for that. Brother Kevin, you were speaking about we're here on Earth, and that Earth becomes our reality. But the thing, nevertheless, the thing I would say is that we're all spiritual beings, and we live in this celestial environment, where if we look at the laws of the celestial environment, we never see planets crashing into planets. We see the perfection that is here in nature, in the nature of things. And when we start to look at these things and start to look at what goes awry in our lives, what causes this psychotic break with reality, or the so-called psychotic break with reality, we realize that that is only a part of it. And when we come back to spirit, there is no psychotic break with spirit. It's impossible for spirit to have a psychotic break.
That's right.
So when we get back to our true nature, we live in this world of a consciousness where we become one with everything that's here and increases our understanding. And so then we have admiration for the Creator. We don't have to become religious, but we have admiration for the Creator, because all that's here is miraculous. The fact that we are born, that our parents come together, excuse me, and that sperm and egg unite, it's a miracle. And we give thanks to the Creator, that spiritual part of us. But we've been sold a bill of goods where we forget to look at the truth about ourselves. And when we look at the truth within ourselves and live within spirit, there is no such thing as a psychotic break. There is only that oneness. It's been taught to me that we live in an unbounded ocean of consciousness. And the unbounded ocean of consciousness, every thought is in there. Just some thoughts have limitations on them, and some thoughts are unlimited. So it always comes down to our choice. We talk about the horrendous part to psychotic break. And all I can say is, when I was hearing the story on this evening, I thought about the woman out in Iowa who ended up murdering her children, murdering her ex-husband, because she thought that they were zombies. And we talked about the zombie apocalypse. So on one level, it's real. but she had become so far out of the realm of spirit that this became real for her. And so we have to find ways and methods to come back to the spiritual, to come back to the truth about themselves. Because if not, we will remain in the psychotic breaks. We will have the neurotic looking at everything because there's only one consciousness. It's a unity consciousness. And when we step away from that unity consciousness, the duality brings about everything. That's where the fear comes in, that one person has more than you, or then the jealousy and all the negativity. When we come back to the unity and see the oneness of all this, we walk in a much greater state of inner peace, love, harmony, and happiness. And I think in the bottom line is, in our heart of hearts, that's what we all desire to bring about and live in a paradise where we live in a golden age, we live on heaven and earth, and work towards this greater and greater peace.
Brother Sar.
Okay, I like to thank you, brother.
Like that meditation, brother, and wake up. Okay.
Brother Kevin, I thank you for putting on this this discussion, the series. I thank the brothers for coming along and dialoguing and, you know, allowing me to throw some jabs here and there, you know, all that type of thing in a spiritual sense. You know, but I tell you, Don Kevin King put me up to it. But no, I'm sorry. But nonetheless, I've been taking it easy. No matter. That's the therapist in me. But look, so I think you know, I think that from everybody's perspective, their reality is accurate to them. I like to say that when we talk about mental health, I think there's underlining there's an underlying tone that therapy or mental health or even Western mental health is not necessarily anything to deal with. I would say people probably be surprised if they were to go and see a therapist. And many therapists is right-brained and you know, and call themselves spiritual as well. You know, it kind of depends. But one of the things I do want to impress upon people is, you know, when you talk about mental health, it is important to seek some assistance from either a professional or someone who's grounded in the spirit. Hey, so let me say that again. Ground in spirit, you know. You know, you can jump and you can put your ass on the ground. Excuse my language. You can swim and you can dive. You can walk on land and you can jump out of an airplane. You know, you can do all those things, you know. I think it's important for us not to discourage people from seeking professionals. I know that in our community there's a lot of paranoia, rightfully so to a degree, in seeking out professional help when we have a lot of things going on. So when I think about this word spirit, I think to me, when you're spiritual, the reason why, you know, I don't like to use words to confuse people, because some people, when I look at spirituality on a greater level, I agree with Brother Michael when he says everything is interconnected. So that's why I can't even get to the point of things being carnal. You know, I think that's, you know, or things being physical realm not necessarily being real. You know, when everything is interconnected and this world is so beautiful, as he stated, you know, I think that is. I'm not gonna say think. I'm gonna say there is some power in that as far as having a balanced mental mentality or psychological perspective, understanding good mental health. So, but the word spirit is just a word, you know, spirituality. Some people will never know the word. You don't have to be spiritual because you might use something else. You could be, and some people are just as healthy and don't give a damn about anything esoterical. So I think there's more than one. I mean, I know there's more than one way to be healthy. But if you're too rigid on any end, that what you call spiritual and that what you call physical, typically something's out of order. So I'm gonna throw the word balance up there because Brother Paul said balance last week. At the beginning, to say we need to be balanced. Then he told me we don't need to be balanced at the end of the session. So I don't know. He started off with balance, then he ended just telling me that no. But yeah, balance is key. Walking the middle path, as Brother Kevin said. You know, but nonetheless, really consider meeting with a professional. And last, I'm just gonna say this. My words are a little discombobulated today, but don't allow spirituality or the guise of spirituality, which people call spirituality, and to some sense, spirituality and religion is not any different for certain people. Spirituality is different words, a million definitions. So sometimes I think we need to better define what we mean by spirit. But I get it. But nonetheless, people can be healthy with or without being spiritual, quote unquote. But some people might just say, I need to be flexible. I need to respect humanity. I respect my brothers and sisters. I'm empathic. I process my emotions. I don't spiritual bypass. Act like anger doesn't exist and this doesn't exist. The people who really tap into their emotions the best, in the deepest, and also their intellect, which is some people call the right and left brain, the right and left hemisphere, the you know, whatever. Some people belittle intellect and lift up spirituality. Nonetheless, all of it. When you embrace all of it for what creation or the creator has put out and put forth, that's what we have. That's when we have healthy individuals. Peace.
Yes, sir. In closing, I want to thank everyone for all their insight, input, and engaging. What stands out? I look at the definition for disorder: a state of confusion. I have come to learn to know you can best diagnose any person or a group by the condition of the circumstances of which they come out of. Back to the definition. A state of confusion is a systematic of an arrangement when it comes to allowing something to control, dictate your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, the manner and way in which we communicate with one another, and our action. This disorder has a serious effect on someone, and it will lead to cause a great amount of harm to him or herself or to another. When it comes to healing, does not mean that the damage never existed. It just means that it does not control. There must be some harm reduction strategies that take place. One of the strategies is seek out the help that you need in order to try to resolve or minimize serious effect of a disorder or a mental disorder. Because it will take its toll on you if you do not, and it would take its toll on family members as well. Remember, the natural urge is in the intellect to see and understand. There is cognitive behavior therapy. There is Gestalt therapy. There is behavior therapy, hypnotherapy, group psychotherapy, expressive therapy, that is through the arts. That is through the arts. And there is narrative therapy. And if you want to throw one in there, say that there is spiritual therapy. Because I've come to learn to know that anything that remains in its natural form, natural state, it is spiritual. Thank you once again for being a part of the gathering, getting the draws off the gold, rediscovering who we really are. I say that we are a living organism because we are always growing, we're always evolving. But in that growth, it corresponds to one's structural development, how he or she structured his or her life, his emotions, his feelings, his thoughts, his attitude, his language, communication, / activity. Thank you for helping me to help make my case that I say that we're suffering from a social learning disorder disability. So we must continue to grow and learn and come back and deal with the human person without any labels, without any titles, but just deal with the human person, which is comprised of mind, body, soul, spirit, and all that is inside of us. And what we say and what we do make an impact on the lives of others when it comes to the totality of their well-being. Until next time, talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace, everyone.